Hello everybody and welcome back. Thank you very much for joining me. My name is Deborah Hatswell and you're listening to BBR Investigations. Tonight I'm sharing with you the experiences of a lovely lady named Dawn. I saw the grey lady as a child and recently I experienced a sudden deadly silence. And I've also added some accounts from the area, one of which is one snow-covered field was a lake of blood. I received an email recently from a lovely lady who shared her paranormal and supernatural experiences with me, and we discussed what it was like being a witness to these things at a very early age. When Dawn first contacted me, she was worried that she'd included far too much information in her email, and she apologised for doing so. In fact, adding as much detail as possible is really helpful for me. I often don't know the area the witness is speaking about, or I may not be able to correctly pinpoint how to help someone investigate their own case if I only know a small portion of one event that sometimes lasts only seconds. I usually have the same questions for most people who contact me. Number one being, is this the only experience you've had that you can't explain? Second, how old were you when you had your first experience that you found impossible to describe to somebody? And does anyone in your family also have incidents that they would class as strange or unexplained? And of course, any detail or information included on the event that you're contacting me about is vital. Any detail, however insignificant it may seem to you, may hold a vital clue. There may be a smell in the air or a shift in the atmosphere. What did the thing you saw look like? How was it moving? How far were you away from it? And what were you doing prior to the event? And how did you feel afterwards, during, and going forwards? These are really important questions. And the most important is, how do you want to deal with this going forward? That's up to you. That's your choice. You hold the control in this situation. Then I can discuss if you want to have a private chat and you want to be interviewed, if you want to meet an investigator at the scene or chat with them online, all of which are offered here at BBR. And if we can't help, then we will contact one of our many sources and sister teams out there in the field and ask them to help on our behalf. The case I'm starting with tonight gives a very good example of what it's like to live a lifetime with weird things happening around you, regardless of your age at the time. It shows how the ability to tune in runs in family lines. And if you notice, our witness says her mother and grandmother knew or sense things. But for our witness, it was something she sees rather than feels. In her family, it was handled very differently to mine. It was accepted, and she felt lucky to see the things she saw. It's different to each of us as we're unique individuals, unique strengths and abilities. We come together, as a whole, we each have a finger on the pulse of this quantum world around us. I'm also a great believer in people looking at their own cases. It gives the power back to you if the events are traumatic. Or it may simply answer some questions you've had. Or it could be a case of simple validation. So let's hear from Dawn about some of her experiences that happened to her in the UK. Her name's Dawn Rowlands and she said, "Hi Deb, I really hope you don't mind me contacting you about this. This email's a bit long, I'm afraid, but I want to give you as much background information in the hopes of maybe explaining to you what has happened around me since I was a young age. I've had a lot of paranormal experiences, stretching back as far as I can remember. My mum has said that from the age when I could talk, it was clear that I was seeing things. I've also seen stuff. I've always seen stuff. My mum, maternal grandmother, have also had this kind of sensitivity to things, except both my nan and my mum felt stuff rather than see it like I do. I grew up in Somerset, and when we moved up to the Shropshire border several years ago, the first weird incident that I remember happened around my 6th birthday. My primary school had arranged a day out to the Longleat Estate, which is a fantastic stately home which you can visit. And of course, it has the famous safari park. Mum came along as a chaperone that day, and during the tour of that absolutely gorgeous Elizabethan manor house, my mum noticed that I seemed distracted by something. It appeared to her that I was watching something moving across the room towards the door. And she asked me what I was looking at, and I said, the pretty lady in the grey dress. Well, as the tour came to an end, Mum asked one of the guides if the house was haunted. And evidently it was. And people would report seeing her just as I had. She's known as the Grey Lady. This happened in, say, 72, 73, Deb. I think me and Dawn are a very similar age. Dawn went on to tell me that luckily, because both her nan and her mum understood about this type of thing, she was taken seriously. She was never told that she was daft or to stop telling tales or anything like that. Dawn said, I think this could be why I never lost the ability. It's my thought that when as a child, if you always tell them that they're making stuff up, or they sort of are telling lies or being dramatic, they sort of switch off that ability. Dawn said, another experience I had was when I was around the age of 9. My nan lived in the little village of Buckland Dinham, near Frome in Somerset. My granddad was buried in the churchyard there, and I would regularly go to visit his grave with Nan. I spent a lot of time with her, and we were very close, and she's now with Grandad in that same spot. On one occasion, I went for a little walk into the part of the graveyard, and I saw a little girl. She looked a little younger than I was at the time, and she had light brown hair, and she was wearing a cream-coloured dress with a satin ribbon sash tied around the waist. She was about 40 feet in front of me, and then she walked behind a gravestone and didn't reappear. And when I told Nan, she came with me to have a look, but we didn't see her, and Nan just said that I'd been very lucky to see her. Another weird event I had occurred when I was 11. I was rushed into the Royal United Hospital in Bath, and I had to have an emergency surgery because my appendix burst. On the way from the theatre, I left my body. I was positioned above and behind the trolley that I was lying on. I could see myself on the trolley being pushed by a male nurse, and on either side of me were 2 female nurses. The one on the right was pushing a drip holder, and the one on the left had a hand on the sheet covering me. And suddenly I saw myself start to struggle, and the nurse was trying to hold my arms. I was watching this as I was still above and behind the trolley being wheeled away from me. I then saw myself pull the tube out of my nose. The trolley was going through a pair of double doors, and then I sort of slipped down towards the trolley, and the memory ended. I was pretty ill for about a week, and I was kept sedated in the ICU. And as I came around, a nurse came up to check on me, and it was the same nurse, and I said, I'm really sorry for fighting and pulling out that tube. And she looked really shocked. And Mum asked what I meant, and I told them what I'd seen. Apparently, because I was so ill and it had been touch and go for the first few days, they hadn't even told Mum what had happened to me. They didn't want to cause more worry for her and Dad. I still don't quite understand what happened. But when I talked to that nurse, she said I described exactly what had happened, even down to her resting her hand on the sheet covering me. I don't know if this has any link to the paranormal things I've experienced, but that memory is as clear today as it was in the late 70s when it happened. Another more recent experience happened during the first lockdown in 2020. I drove to a local shop, and as I parked up, I saw an elderly chap to my right starting to walk towards the shop. And as I got out of the car, he was about 30 feet or so away from me, and he was wearing a tweed jacket and a cap, and he had a stick with him. And I said, good morning to him, and he smiled and replied. I went to the cash point, and I could hear him walking towards me. I could hear the stones crunch and the tap of his stick. The door to the shop was about 6 feet to my right, completely in clear view. I heard the chap stop, and I assumed he was waiting to get to the cash machine. As I got my money, I turned around and said, "Sorry for holding you up, and I'll get out of the way now." And he wasn't there. There was no sign of him at all. He hadn't gone into the shop, and there was nowhere he could have gone in that short amount of time. I've had many other experiences like these over the years. I've had some where I feel weird or uncomfortable, like I've walked into a big cobweb or into an area of dense, cold fog, but I've never felt afraid. Dawn went on to say, "The next incident, and the one I contacted you about, is the only time I've ever felt real fear from something I couldn't see. I now live on the Shropshire-Powys border. I'm about 10 miles from Wrexham, about the same from Llangollen. There's an Iron Age hill fort about a mile from where I live now, and as well as several castles and Offa's Dyke. This experience was so odd that I actually made a note of it in my phone calendar when it happened. I suffer from chronic pain, and when I'm having a good day, I like to go for a wander in the wooded area behind my home. On Saturday, August the 6th, 2022, my mum and I went for a walk, and I'm fortunate to still have both my parents, and I spend as much time with them as I can. It was about 10:30 a.m. and it was a gorgeous day. We walked through the green belt behind my home. It's a popular place for dog walkers. A little further along, there's a playing field and a park area, and then a few fields and a pond. And as we walked through the trees, we were looking out for birds and squirrels and bugs. It was just a totally normal walk. Then suddenly, with no reason, it went deadly quiet. It was like a flick of a switch. My mum and I both stopped dead in our tracks, and Mum said, "It's gone absolutely bloody quiet." Then said, "Do you feel anything?" We both had this awful feeling of being watched. I put that weird prickly feeling on my back, that one you get where you know there's someone behind you. We both looked around but saw nothing. We cut the walk short and began heading back. And after a few minutes, the sound started up again, and the birds gradually started singing, and the bugs were buzzing, etc. Mum and I have talked about this several times. We've both put it down to something paranormal, but I've never felt fear like that before. I've walked around there probably hundreds of times. Such a lovely place to walk. I now had the same intense feeling of fear 3 times in total while walking there. All of these were in August and September of last year during the day. I've walked around there this year quite a few times and it felt really normal, but not on those days. She said it's probably nothing, but after hearing the reports of stuff that's happened pretty close to where these things happened, I wanted to let you know. As with all of our witnesses, I offered Dawn complete confidentiality, and she said, "No, it's fine, Deb. I'm not bothered about being anonymous. I'm at an age now where I don't worry about what others may think. These things have always happened around my family. All those close to me know about my strange experiences. I knew there'd been odd reports from the Gresford area and also through Cheshire too, and I wonder if any of these are linked." Now, before we continue, I wanted to pick up on some of the things that Dawn said. She pointed out that feeling of being watched that comes on suddenly. Your senses are amazing as human beings, and they are picking up on millions of signals around you all of the time, and you don't even realise you're doing it. That fact that you feel you're being observed usually means that you are. There have been many scientific studies that have looked into this, and normally us humans are very, very good at picking up that something's in the area. The second thing she said was a sudden deadly silence. Now, one of our investigators was out in Nottingham, and she said the same thing. She said there was actual parts of the wood yesterday, Deb, that were completely silent. Well, as you know, it's a very vocal time of year for the woodlands. Everything's coming to life. Everything's giving new birth, and we should be hearing the birds, Normally when they go silent, that means there's a predator about. Well, they'll do one or two things. They'll go completely silent, or they will start to alarm, and you will know that you alarm. If you hear a crow or a magpie alarm, you never forget that. So she said it stood out as being strange. She's used to walking in that woodland. She knows it. And that's why I suggest that if you want to get into this kind of it, just find one woodland. You don't have to go all over the country looking. Find one woodland and watch it for the year. Get used to the flow and the rhythm. That's the only way you're going to tune into the area, and get comfortable with it enough to start to notice these strange peripheral things that start to happen. She also said that on many times she'd visited that area and it had been fine, except for those few days, things felt different. And on that one particular visit, the feeling was much more emphasised. May I suggest that this could be a seasonal pattern? I often take similar reports in the same areas years apart, which happen in the same season. The case in Woody Bay springs to mind. Many of the reports in that area that take place in the first 2 months of the year. Why? I don't know, but it's a pattern worth noting. Lots of investigators will study a woodland and will have no problem whatsoever, and then on one day it will feel like they are really intruding and shouldn't be there. I would pick up on that gut feeling and just trust it and leave it. Just leave it for a few days, go somewhere else. And the next time you go back, see how it feels, I also like people to take a note of it, because next year, if it happens again, we're almost proving it's a seasonal thing, and that could be really, really important. Dawn stated that she was always encouraged with her abilities, and she was never made to feel silly or dramatic, which is something I heard often. The phrase, "oh, it's our Deb, she's away with the fairies," was said quite a lot. Your families, peers, and other folk will dismiss a child's explanation for who they're talking to. We tell them they're imaginary friends or they're having a nightmare. Our witness's mum knew even as a small baby she was picking up on someone who was visiting. I saw that with both my daughters. I saw them do the same thing, and I bet many of you can do that too. Some of us have pictures of our loved ones that have orbs in them, or strange white lights. We're taught to grow up, to put away these daydreams. That's what I was told. Knuckle down and plug in. Don't be different. Don't stand out from the crowd. Don't champion your strengths. It's called showing off. Be as normal and as invisible as you can be. That sounds like a horrid film about some world domination, and unfortunately, that's just modern life. We should be encouraging our children's experiences. Even if you want to call it imagination, we should be championing that. If we don't know why something's happening, it's really easy to be honest and tell them that we don't know why it's happened, but we understand that it has, and we believe them, rather than explaining it away as something they're doing wrong. I was told I was naughty. So let's look for answers with them. So like myself and Dawn, it's not 50 years before we finally share our truth with the general public. In doing so, we normalise these children and normalise these adults and have these conversations where we say, yeah, I understand. I might not have experienced that myself, but I do understand. I also wanted to look at the areas where our witness tuned in to see what other reports are close to it. Dawn mentioned Gresford, and it's a small village on the outskirts of Wrexham, and there is a report there of dog-like footprints that were left in the snow. The person who reported this to me stated in a snow-covered field he came upon enormous tracks which resembled those of a wolf, but the prints he found were considerably larger. I'd love that witness to contact me again, as we lost contact, and he told me that he had images of the wolf's prints, and as I say, we lost touch and I didn't get to see them. There is a second report from close to Gresford, and it's historical, and those reports are really, really important. Most people gloss over the older reports. If someone in 1790 sat down and wrote something out, it was incredibly important, because back then you had to be a scholar or have a decent amount of money for a record even to be made. Now, a record of an enormous wolf-like animal, as I said, dated back to the 1790s, when a stagecoach travelling between Denbigh and Wrexham was attacked and overturned by an enormous black beast, almost as long as the coach horses. This animal was described as terrifying, and it tore into one of the horses and killed it, while the other horse broke free from its harness and ran off into the night, whining in terror. The attack took place just after dusk, when a full moon was on the horizon. The moon that month seemed blood red due to the dust from a recent fire in the Hatchmere area, and it was called the Deadly Wolf Moon. The next year, in the winter of '91, a farmer went into his snow-covered field just 7 miles east of Gresford, and he saw enormous tracks that looked like those belonging to an overgrown wolf, a little bit like our witness. He followed the tracks with the blacksmith for 2 miles, and they led to a scene of absolute mutilation, which made the villagers in the area quake with fear. The tracks led into a farmstead where every single animal had either been literally torn to shreds or mortally wounded. One snow-covered field was just a lake of blood, dotted with the carcasses of sheep, cattle, and the farmer's dog. The farmer was found locked up inside his house in a terrible state. He wasn't harmed physically, but he was mentally terrified. He had barricaded himself in there after witnessing an enormous black animal that resembled a wolf ripping out the throat of the sheepdog. The animal had then gone for the farmer, but he just managed to run in the farmhouse in time. He bolted to the heavy oaken door and he rammed the table up to it, and all he had was a pitchfork. The farmer said the wolf pounded on the heavy oak door, almost knocking it off its hinges. The weird-looking animal then stood up on its hind legs like a human and looked in through the windows of the farmhouse. Its eyes were blue and seemed intelligent and also human-like. The beast foamed at the mouth as it peered in, and then bolted from the window to commit more carnage on the farm. Each of the sheep were left as pelts of wool with a head attached, lying flat on the snow like a woolen mat. The animal had even eaten sections of the animal's spines, and no one has ever seen a predator do something like that before. The church set up patrols in search of what was suspected to be a werewolf, and bands of villagers braved the freezing blizzards with lanterns, muskets, pitchforks, anything that they could find to fight off this ravenous beast, but only its tracks were ever seen. 7 years later, 2 men walking across the Bickerton Hills in Cheshire saw something that sent them running for their lives. The full moon had just risen, and as it peeped over the hilltop, the travellers saw the silhouette of an enormous, unidentified animal. The animal lifted its head, let out a blood-curdling howl, which echoed through the Cheshire Hills, and the 2 men rushed into an inn and refused to continue their journey until morning. At dawn on the following day, the mutilated bodies of 2 men were found in a wood just 5 miles from the inn. It didn't seem to be murder because their bodies had been literally slashed to ribbons by something which had claws like knives. One of the victims had tried to cross a stream as he fled the scene of the slaying, and he'd been pounced on and eaten in the water. His head was never found and seemed to have been torn off. The head of the other victim was found stripped of its face and ears, and in other parts of the wood were strewn body parts. The jaws of the animal that killed the man must have been powerful because the victim's skull had been cracked and splintered during the gruesome attack. Someone wrote an anonymous letter and posted it to the local minister, and the letter writer said the beast that had killed the men had been a werewolf, which had been on the loose in the area of Cheshire and Wales for over 100 years. The letter writer said the attack had happened during the eclipse of a moon, when the moon passes the Earth's shadow and seems to turn dark red, and he claimed that he'd heard the terrible screams of the men who were slaughtered by the animal. The writer told the minister to paint crosses on the doors of each dwelling in the village, because the werewolf was driven in by its bloodlust. It was said that a Welsh warlock who had been burnt at the stake by the ancestors of the villagers in the year 1400 was possibly this werewolf. The attacks by the large black wolf gradually died out, and the people of Cheshire, or of Wales, breathed a sigh of release. But even 2 centuries later, attacks by a large unidentified animal were still being reported. In February 92, a Welsh newspaper called the Western Mail reported sightings of a strange bear-like animal that had been seen across Wales. In the north of the county, a farmer who had spotted the animal on the night of the full moon said he had afterwards found 2 of his full-grown 70-pound lambs ripped apart. One of the lambs was flattened, as if it had been run over by a farm tractor. There were around 70 further sightings between 92 and 94. The London Zoo gave the farmers in the area advice for trapping the unknown predator if they came across it. Cages baited with stakes and special trapdoors were installed on the farms in the hopes that the beast would venture into one of them. The thing did go into one cage, but when the door sprung shut, the animal pulled 2 steel bars apart and escaped. London Zoo blamed it on a lunatic who said they must have, got away from a hospital. But the farmer said the animal had pulled the bars apart itself. London Zoo experts said there is no known animal that could have done that, not even a grizzly bear. One pathetic explanation was that it was a wolverine on the loose, but the tracks left by the violent animal seemed to indicate that this was some large variety of wolf. An American expert on animal tracks said the prints left by the animal strongly resembled fossilized tracks left by a long extinct saber-toothed tiger. But the saber-toothed tiger has not roamed in Britain for over 2 million years. I know of lots and lots of canine reports from Crewe, Cheshire, Ellesmere Port, even up to Liverpool. Lots of them. A lot of the reports in the Delamere area are all canine in origin. From the pattern of the sightings made after 95, it would seem that the so-called Welsh werewolf is steadily moving eastwards towards Cheshire and Merseyside. Well, I would say that it's always been like that. That area of the country, Wales used to stretch as far up north past Cumbria. So all of it, Wales. And when you think about the historical reports of Dogman-like creatures in Wales, they have a vast history of it. It goes right the way back to the 2nd century. People reporting these half men, half wolf-like animals. The killing fields are what interests me. These flattened out skin. So the fleece is flattened out, everything's gone apart from the head. That takes some enormous pressure to do that. To bite through an animal's spine, even a 70-pound lamb, would take some doing. And it reminds me of the animal attacks that are reported up in Skye in northern Scotland. One of those had its spine crunched by whatever was killing it. It's just absolutely terrifying to think that there are things out there in the British countryside that can kill an entire herd of cows and sheep. And believe me, cows are not the little furry lovely things that you get from Disney. Cows, if you get into a field and they've got young, they will trample you to death. Quite a few people every year are killed by cows, believe it or not, in the UK. So anything, a dog, the cows would kick a dog to death if there was enough of them in the herd. What we're dealing with has got to be far bigger. You never mess about with a farm dog. So anything that takes out a farm dog to me is worth worrying about. And we should have been taught these things. Why don't we know these things? Whether you're English, Welsh, Scottish or Irish, why do we not know in our school system, in our history, that, in 1790 this was taking place? I suppose it dumbs you down, doesn't it? Like I was saying before, shuts you off, stops you questioning. Plug in, tune out, and do what you're told. Now, Nick is one of my regular listeners, and her dad had an experience in 1977. And Nick is a very well-known paranormal investigator. And she shared his recent post with a few people, and she said that he'd taken a photograph in the area, and the dad had said, "Here's a picture of the exact location of my UFO sighting. I was with my friends, 1977. It approached the trees in the distance. There was a field on the right where we were trying to pitch a tent. And Clay Hill was on the right. Well, many of you will have heard the famous case now known as the Warminster Thing. I've always had an interest in the Warminster Thing case, as many of the things mentioned in it are actually been reported to me over the years. It all started at 1:25 a.m. one Christmas in 1964. I was just a twinkle in my dad's eye then. A resident, Mildred Head, awoke with a start, and her ceiling, she later told the local journalist, Arthur Shuttlewood, her ceiling came alive with strange sounds. It was almost lashing at the roof, whatever it was. It sounded like twigs brushing against the tiles, and it got louder and louder and louder until it reverberated like giant hailstones. Mildred got out of bed to look out the window, but found nothing there. She did, however, hear another noise, a humming sound that grew louder before fading to a faint whisper. It was just the start of what would become a decades-long mystery and a string of UFO sightings known around the world as the Warminster Thing. A few hours later, the soldiers at nearby Nut Camp Army Base were awoken by what sounded like a huge chimney stack from the main block being ripped from the rooftop, then scattered across the whole camp. At 6:30 a.m. in the morning, Roger Rump and his wife were stirred by a similar noise. They described it as sounding like 5,000 tiles on your roof being ripped off and then put back on again with an enormous clatter. At around the same time, Marjorie Bye was walking to church when she was thrown to the ground by a force of this savage sound wave, was how she described it. In total, more than 30 individuals reported hearing mysterious noises that Christmas morning, and there was more to come. Strange things continued to happen in Warminster. The town's just 15 miles from Stonehenge. So, in the new year, in Feb 1965, an entire flock of pigeons suddenly died. The following month, 3 families heard loud noises coming from above the houses, and their roofs and windows shaking with the force. And in June, the Warminster residents began to see unidentified flying objects in the sky. Descriptions of the UFOs vary from person to person, with one describing what they saw as cigar-shaped and covered with winking bright lights, and another looked like twin red hot pokers hanging downwards. The unusual events began to receive national attention, and people flocked to Warminster, hoping to get a glimpse of the thing. Over the August bank holiday of 1965, an estimated 8,000 people descended on the town. The following month, when resident Gordon Faulkner claimed that he'd captured a photo of a UFO, the Daily Mirror published the picture. By that time, the news had even made its way to the USA, with newspapers as far as California reporting on the eerie events in a sleepy market town. Sightings and unexplained noises continued intermittently over the coming years, ranging from the sight of a ball of crimson light in the sky to this terrible droning sound that made the witnesses' floor and bed shake. Interest in the mysterious phenomenon remained strong, and in '66 the BBC filmed Pie in the Sky, and it was a documentary about the events. Shuttlewood penned several books on the subject, while a local UFO enthusiast named Ken Rogers published the Warminster UFO newsletter. By the early 70s, sightings of the Warminster things began to decline, and with them the number of curious visitors that had once swamped the town. I think the last report I heard from Warminster was about 2017, but you guys will probably know better than me if there's anything out there. That tells me for at least 50 years there has been strange activity on the land there, and that land runs all the way up through Ellesmere Port and Cheshire, and all of the areas where we get high numbers of high paranormal experiences, canine or dog-like creatures, and also UFO reports, even as far across as Macclesfield. I worked a case this month where one of our BBR members, he had at home. He had to have some repairs done in the bedroom. For one night, they decided to sleep downstairs and make it easier to get it over and done with. They were doing that, and around about 12 o'clock, they actually heard a really strange sound outside, almost like metal. And I know that many of you who are investigators and podcasters have heard of this before. They also heard a really loud growl, the type of growl that you can feel. And the dogs were scared to go out. This is in an area where all of these reports are. But we could also be looking at a big cat, because it is definitely big cat land. They did look up the growl, and he said that it did sound like a panther. Which is, it's just as frightening, isn't it, that there's a cat that size? But we know they're out there. This year we've had a DNA, a positive DNA, for cats. Wonder how long it'll be before the government will admit to them, though, because it's going to take them forever to admit to the fact that there are cryptids out there running around and that there are people going missing. I mean, we have proof now that at least 12 werewolf reports have been reported to the police. I know of 2 others, and I guarantee if we could pull the information from the Freedom of Information Act, I would imagine there are other counties in the UK where people have reported upright dog-like creatures. I've worked a report in Cheshire where the guy told the removal man that there was a werewolf that watched him from the window at night. There's a young lad who likes to wild camp, David, and he saw one from his bedroom window watching him from the woodlands. These stories go back generations, as I say. I know one young lad who saw what his gran decided was a black wolf stalking them, and that was in Ellesmere Port. And all of these tales have similarities, and people may call them coincidences. I don't believe in coincidences. What you have is a network of witnesses from over a 50-year period, all trying to describe what they saw or what they experienced that day. And then you add into that the reports of a blood-covered field. That's not a normal anything in the UK that would predate in that way. And as I say, these stories are lost to us. They're not given to us. We're not educated with them. So if we weren't making a note of them now, like old-fashioned storytellers, you have to pass the information on. And that's one way of doing it. There's a lot of strange stuff happening out there to ordinary people every single day. And the majority of them keep quiet about it. They don't share. And I want to change that. I want to make that as normal as anything for everybody. We all have the right to share our truth, regardless of how strange it is. What's strange to me is normal to somebody else. And we have to remember that. It's a wide spectrum. Each and every one of us is unique. I've never met 2 people who are exactly the same. Lots of similarities. People where you'd say, oh, they're 2 peas in a pod. But they still have a uniqueness and a skill set and an ability to tap in. And honestly, I don't think you'd be listening to this podcast if you didn't think that you possibly have the ability to tune in. Have a lovely week, and I'll see you all same time, same place. Good night, everyone.